Blooded Through was like Dear White People, the show and the movie, but at a HBCU. Shout out to LaDarrion Williams for writing a fantasy that black boys could see themselves in. This book was atmospherically dark. It was action-packed. It had a lot of mystery from the beginning to the end. It was fun to read. It had fun moments with some drama and romance. It like mixed in there too. There were moments of a little bit of illegal activities and cussing in this book, but it ain't too much more than other young adult books. At that age, baby, I was reading adult books with even more language and more illegal activities in that. And also even more adult activities than this book offered. Like, baby, I read Lady Chatterley's Lover, okay? I read Men Crying to Dark by Michael Baisden, okay? I appreciate that. Although I kind of said, like, it feels like Dear White People, the show and the movie, I appreciated there wasn't included a white person in the story to make it more accessible to, like, other people. Or, like, it had to make it like, okay, we have to make it more accessible, so we need to include this one white character in there for people to feel seen, for non-black people to feel seen in the book. I appreciated that it was predominantly black characters, not just because it was an HBCU, because I mean, well, it's not like white boys. I don't know about white girls or white women going to HBCUs, but there are white boys, white men going to HBCUs and in fraternities. They got the right to, but at the end of the day, I appreciated that this book really focused and centered black people, and it was all about black people. And I do feel like if there was to have like a white person in the story, the only way for me personally, how I would have wanted that story to play out, it needed to be like a commentary highlighting how having white people in like predominantly black spaces, and those white people are taking advantage of black people's kindness or acceptance. You know, like giving out the black card and stuff, giving out the black card and giving people honorary black cards and honorary invitations to the cookout. And then these people are like, just like, you know, eating up all the food off the table and ain't contribute nothing, didn't bring nothing. And even if there was anything to bring, they'd probably bring blueberries and potato salad, or, you know, I don't know, like blueberries in mac and cheese or something. Like, no, we don't want it. We don't need it. No, thank you. Okay, if it had a white character coming into the community, benefiting from the community, and not actually contributing anything much or necessary or valuable to the community. I'm thinking of people like DJ Vlad and Andrew Schultz, and we don't need none of that. No more of that in the community, all right? I loved the magical field trip in history class. Like, that was one of my favorite parts of reading the book, and it was such a pivotal moment. I don't know, it was just such a great experience. I love that part of the story. 1 minute you in class, next minute you know you teleported off into the past, into a historical event, and you're learning about that event hands-on, immersively, just like in your face. Like, I love that, and I appreciated that so much about that scene. But I do wish that when they started asking questions about the field trip, then also bringing up other historical moments and events, I wish that some of those like questions had been answered kind of on the field trip in the midst of things, or like a little side within the field trip. I do wish that the other historical events that came up out of those questions also got the magical field trip treatment as well, instead of just like answering the questions. Like, I understand that like this discourse and asking these questions is a major part of the collegiate experience, but they're at like a magical HBCU, y'all going on magical field trips, all kind of like magical stuff is going on, and we're just gonna sit in class and still ask more questions when we could have just really gone on another field trip and experienced that, explored it immersively and hands-on. Like, that would have been so much more enjoyable to read. That in itself did feel a little Dear White People-ish for me. I don't know, it just did. It felt like something that like I've experienced from watching the show or seen on the show, where it's just like we're just asking a bunch of questions and we're bringing up stuff and we're just talking about it. And I think that works for Dear White People because it is not, there's no fantastical element to it to kind of take you out and kind of express this thing. It felt like that, and I feel like it didn't need to do that because we're in fantasy, we're doing magic. Like, let's get magical, all right? I did appreciate the knowledge that this book was dropping. It was great to learn some of the things that I learned, and I appreciate experiencing things that I already knew through reading this book. I appreciate the scene where Dr. Aquila was telling Malik about the history of the connection of black people to watermelon, but I do think it could have been delivered better. That scene too could have been a little bit more magical. It felt like a lecture. It felt like, I'm about to tell you a lesson. I'm breaking the fourth wall. Like, readers, listen to this. I'm telling you all about watermelon and black people's connection to it. It was just such a halt, let's talk about this moment, instead of just like integrating it into the story, integrating it into the fantasy of the story. It just felt like a Dr. Aquila monologue moment. It could have been that monologue, but it could have been deeper. How I would have liked it to have gone, when Dr. Aquila was giving Malik the watermelon, and he said, like, isn't this a bit cliche? And then she starts going into the history of black people's connection to watermelon and how it has helped black people to thrive and survive. Tell all that history, but in the process of telling the history, I see it as like Malik would be listening to the story and eating the watermelon, and then we're getting like a description of, like, a sensory description of what the watermelon tastes like, it smells like, the texture of it in his mouth, like what that feels like. He's also having like a mental experience of what Dr. Aquila is telling him, and he's like picturing it in his head, just like this very vivid mental picture of it, that it almost feels like a metaphysical experience. I don't know if metaphysical is the right word. It is happening in his head, but it's almost like he's living it out for real. That would have been a great way to share that. Then by the end of the story, Malik feels changed. He feels mentally changed. He feels physically changed because the watermelon refreshed him, like physically refreshed him. And also his knowledge of it kind of changes the perception of watermelon. It's not a part of black culture that you're supposed to be ashamed of. It has helped black people thrive in the US. Malik is walking away changed, and so are we walking away changed with that scene. He kind of walks away wondering, like, was it magic as to why he was able to like picture everything and it felt so immersive and real to him, or was it just like his active imagination? It would have just been more immersive and more interesting and more engaging to read. I think the way that it was delivered felt a little bit very Dear White People-ish. I liked the musical name drops. For Malik, he was listening to Kendrick Lamar, J. Cole, Victoria Monet. I appreciated that insight into like the kind of music that Malik listened to. Is there like a Malik playlist, and is there like a playlist for the book? I would love the two, but I did not like some of the pop culture, black Twitter, black culture references. Some of them worked. They felt effortless. They felt like they made sense. They're like, oh, they felt integrated into the story. And some of the references, they felt kind of unnatural and cringy. They felt a little forced, like they were pandering. I don't know, like they were breaking the fourth wall. I don't know, I just didn't like it. It just felt so cheesy. There was a building named after Chadwick Boseman on the campus, and I loved that. I thought that was such a great homage to Chadwick Boseman. I appreciated that so much. Malik was on the campus tour, and when they got to that building, he did the Wakanda Forever salute, and I was just like, why'd you do it? Felt cheesy to me. It felt corny. It felt a little cringe. Like, I get it, but really, we're just gonna like the Wakanda Forever, and girl, I don't know. That just, I feel like we could have just, acknowledged Chadwick Boseman, rest in peace. I don't know, girl. Have at it. I'm sounding like them people on Twitter that be sounding real strict and like I don't like to have fun. But I'm gonna be that. Y'all can have at it, enjoy it, all of that. It wasn't for me. And it also felt like a Dear White People-esque thing. The references, the small font of the text. And the writing style, all three kind of drained me as I read the book. I feel like the book didn't need to be as long as it was. It's not even so much that it didn't need to be as long as it was. For it to be this long, certain things could have been changed and adjusted. Being able to expand more on like those magical field trips, like that could have justified like the length a little bit more. And like the Dr. Aquila scene, like that could have like justified a little bit more length. I feel like just how the story was written, I feel like it just made the story longer than it needed to be, and just made it a little bit more draining to read. I felt like Malik's voice was his adult self reliving this period period in time of his life while telling this story. And it felt like it was a combination of his adult self mixed with his teenage self. They were just combined telling the story together. So certain times I felt like he said things and it was just a little bit more adult. It just felt a little bit more mature. And I get that people are nuanced, even like teenagers would be nuanced like that sometimes they would have a little bit more maturity at their age. Or the other thing I was thinking is that it is the author injecting a little bit of themselves into Malik's character, like not like a self-insert character, but just like injecting some of his voice into the voice of Malik. At times it felt like an adult perspective that was removed from the ways a teenager would think and talk. I do wish the story was told in a third person limited instead and with multiple POVs, because I would have liked to have known about some of the other characters' POVs a little bit. But I also understand that it's mainly Malik's stories. Like getting it from Malik's perspective would have just been the best route. I would have preferred a third person limited. I think that would have helped with reading through his voice. I think that part of the writing style that made it kind of a little tedious and draining for me at times to read. Sometimes it felt like too many words. Like, why so many words? This writing could have just been like, it could have glazed by a little faster. It would have been a nicer read. One of the perspectives I would have loved to have experienced was how Savon and D'Lo got together, because when we first meet D'Lo, we meet him like hooking up with this guy and he kissed the guy on the lips, and I don't know, they're the like how we met him and this guy kind of hooking up and kissing and stuff. It didn't feel like it was just a hookup. Even if it was just a hookup, it didn't feel like it was like a one-time thing. It felt like either friends with benefits or it feels like it was like a dating budding kind of relationship, but it didn't feel like, oh, this was just a one-hit quick kind of thing. So when D'Lo and Savon showed up and they're together in a relationship later on in the book, I'm just like, how? Like, how did that happen? I would like that explained. Like, it never really got explained, and I get it. It's Malik's story, so it won't really get explained. It doesn't need to be explained. You know, Malik doesn't really necessarily, that's none of his business. He really doesn't care, so he's not gonna go like, what, how did you two get together? Like, oh, all of a sudden you two are together. Like, he's not gonna ask them questions. But bitch, I want to know. I'm asking them questions because I'm nosy. I would like to know. That connection felt so sudden, and it felt like it was just putting the two queer characters, the two LGBTQ characters together in a relationship and just kind of making that like a nice little neat package, and it's done. They get a storyline, they get a character development, they got something going on. I don't mind it because I would actually like to know more about their story, how they got together, how things are going. I would love a little novella about their story and them being together. I would love that. I think that would be so cute. So hopefully, I'm hoping that LaDarrion is willing to like write a little novella about Savon and D'Lo, like just a little side thing. And another little side note about D'Lo. I know I've heard the explanation that D'Lo, it has nothing to do with down low, being that he's like, you know, like a very discreet or very like masculine presenting discreet gay man. But I also feel like the fact that the masculine presenting discreet gay man, his name is D'Lo, it was like my first thought was like D'Lo, like down low. I know the D'Lo is just like a nickname. It's a shortened abbreviated version of D'Angelo, but still, I was thinking that was the first thing I thought. I figured I would share. One of the things that I wanted to know was, how do you get from Mama Aya's house to the HBCU without teleporting? Maybe I missed it while I was reading it. I mean, I did say I was a little drained at times when I was reading it, so I might have missed a few things. I really would like to know. I don't know if that's going to get answered in the next book. If you don't teleport to the HBCU, to Cayman University, then like, how would you get there? Is Cayman University in on a magical plane? Is it like not on Earth, or is it on Earth but hidden? Where is it? And how would you get there? Like, can you take a bus? Can you take a pickup truck? Can you take something to get there? Because I mean, there were people that were at Mama Aya's house, like the police officer, and he was like on the campus. I was like, how are people getting here? How are people getting here if not by teleportation? Like, is there another way to get there? I'll definitely look out for that on a reread of the book. I am looking forward to the next book because I want to know more about Malik's mother, and I want to know who Malik's father is. I want to know what's going to happen to Alexis, What's going on with you, girl? Malik had so much growth throughout this book. He started off traumatized, intense, like in survival mode, a little bit hardened. As the story progressed, as he like settled in, like he was getting a little lighter, a little bit more relaxed, a little bit more freed up with everything that kind of happened at the end of the book. Is he gonna regress? And then he's gonna have to like work his way back up and even harder and faster in the second book. And is he gonna have like trust issues that he has to work through? Because baby, you learned some new revelations. You thought things were sweet and you thought things were cute, and now it's like, bitch, what the fuck? I came here, y'all got my guard down. Now y'all got me guards up, bugging out. Like, what the fuck is going on over here? You know what I'm saying? I love how the book ended, and overall, I enjoyed the book, despite being drained, despite how I felt about the book, my thoughts about the book. I love that Black boys have a fantasy book that they could nerd out over, and I'm looking forward to seeing more books like these for young adults. I know there are a few others that are like out for young adults with boys as the lead. I definitely have to read those, but definitely I'm looking forward to seeing more fantasy led by Black boys and showing different facets of Black boyhood in fantasy and sci-fi settings. I hope the story gets an adaptation. I hope it gets a show adaptation, something on streaming, something on Netflix, maybe HBO, Amazon Prime, something. I hope it gets a nice adaptation because it has the potential to be a great and successful show. And I am excited for the next book in the series, Bones at the Crossroads, which is coming out on July the 29th, 2025.